Hi everyone, we are on math lesson number 5. Our objective today, please repeat it with me. I can compose arrays from rows and columns and count to find the total using objects. We are going to start off with a little fluency, counting by tens. So we are going to be skip counting by tens. When you see the arrow pointing up, you are going to be counting up by tens. When you see the arrow turn downwards, you are going to count down by tens. All right, we are going to start at 60. 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, 130, 140, 140, 130, 120, 110, 100, 90, 100, 110, 120, 130, 140, 150, 160, 170, 180, 190, 200, 210, 220, 220, 210, 200, 190, 180. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to start by just giving you a little warning that this is a little bit of a long lesson, and I'm going to try and make it as concise or as short as possible, but there's a lot of new information that we're going to be learning today. So what I'd like you to do before we start is grab a pencil and a piece of paper just so that you have that ready for when we need it. Pause the video until you have your supplies, and you can press play when you have everything. All right, so our first question of the day is how many bears are in each group? So we've got one group here and one group here. Did you say 3 bears are in each group? Well, you got it. That was an easy one. All right, next question is how many groups? Well, there is one group and there's another group, 2. And last, how many bears are all together? Well, I know that there are a couple different ways I can find this. I can either count by ones and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is not the most efficient way, but I can do it. I can count by my groups, so I can go 3, and 3 more is 6. I think that's probably the most efficient way. So there are 6 bears altogether. Okay, so I just moved our bear groups down on the page a little bit. And what we are going to be doing is arranging these groups of 3 into rows of 3 instead. So whenever I see that word rows, see how I'm underlining that? That is super important. I know that when I see the word row, I have to think of something that is going side to side. Okay? So I'm drawing a line that's horizontal from side to side, and I also see that there is a 3 right here. So in each row, there is 3. So after I've drawn my horizontal row, my line, I'm going to just draw 3 quick X's, because that's going to remind me, oh, yes, each row needs to have 3 bears in it. Okay, so now I'm going to move my bears to the right spaces in the row. 1, 2, 3. Oh, there's no more room in that row. I've got to make another one. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So now I want you to think about what you just noticed. We just created an array. Before we had bears kind of scrambled all over the place. And now we have a nice organized array. What are you noticing? How many rows are there? How many bears? How many columns? How many bears are in each row? Just kind of say a couple of the things that you're noticing right now. All right, how many rows are there? Well, I can't remember. Are rows up and down or are rows side to side? Oh yeah, rows are side to side. So there are 1, 2 rows, okay? How many bears are in each row? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. There are 3 bears in each of those rows. How many bears are all together? 6. All right, let's move on to another one. Instead of talking about rows this time, we are going to talk about columns. So columns are lines that go up and down. So it says that we want to arrange the bears into 2 columns. I know that I need to draw 2 lines that are going up and down. 2 columns. Now I see that each column needs to be of 3. Another way of saying that is 2 columns that have 3 bears or whatever it is in that column. Okay, so on each of these columns, I am going to write 3 X's. And then I can go and move my bears to those spots. Okay. How many columns do you see? I see 1 and 2. 2 columns. And how many bears are in each column? Well, I think I went a little too fast. How many bears are in each column? We've got 1, 2, 3 in this column. 1, 2, 3 in that column. So we've got 3 bears in each of those columns. Now, we've got another question that I think a lot of you learned when you were looking at our video about arrays yesterday. Is there another way to group the bears? So can we arrange these bears in a different order? Right now, we have bears that are in 2 columns of 3 rows. And we can also flip it, turn it on its side. So instead of having 2 columns, we have 3 columns. And instead of having 3 rows, we have 2 rows. Okay, so that's another way that we can group the bears. We didn't even really have to do anything. All we did was just flip it on its side. All right. I'd like you right now to quietly whisper into your hand how many rows are in this array of bears. So I want you to count how many rows you see. When you have your answer, I want you to whisper it into your hand. Now remember, rows go side to side. 1, 2, 3. Did you say 3 rows? Excellent. Our second question, how many bears are in each row? Take a minute to think to yourself, how many bears are in each of these rows? One, two, 1, 2, 1, 2. 2 bears are in each of these rows. All right, let's count together to find the total. We can go 2, 4, 6. We could go 3, 6. We could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. All right, so here's when you're going to need your paper and your pencil. We have a problem that we need to figure out together. And I want you to pretend that we've been given 12 little beans. And our job is to put them into equal groups. Equal groups. But instead of just putting them into piles, I want you to group them in an array. Remember, arrays help us stay nice and organized. And that's super important in math. So I want you right now to think of as many ways to draw 12 beans in an array. And when you've thought of all the ways possible, I want you to start the video again, or start from where you left off and see if you've gotten all of them. Okay, so pause it right now. Draw as many arrays as you can and press play when you're ready. All right, so everyone should have drawn some nice, neat arrays with their beans. The first that we came up with is looking like this, where we've got 2 columns with 6 beans, 2 columns and 6 rows, which would give us our 12 beans. And then we can flip it on its side. So now we have 6 columns and 2 rows of beans. All right, so these are 2 ways to group them. Let's look at 2 more ways. We've got 3 columns of beans and 4 rows of beans. And then we can flip it on its side. So now we have 4 columns and 3 rows. And the last way that we can group them in an array is like this. We've got 1 really, really long column, 12 rows of beans, or we can have 12 columns of beans, 1 row of beans. Okay, so right now we are going to read our application problem, and this is going to involve a little bit of imagination to really get it right. So let's read this application problem all together. Ready? Mrs. White is in line at the bank. There are 4 teller windows and 3 people are standing in line at each window. So I just want to pause right there because if we don't know what all the words in our word problem mean, then we cannot continue with our word problem. Now, if you already know what teller windows are at a bank, then that's great. You'll know how to solve this. But if you don't know what teller windows are, you're going to need to do some research to figure out what that is so that you can answer this question correctly. So, teller windows at a bank are basically just windows that have different spaces for people to come up to and exchange their money or give their money to the bank teller. This also kind of looks like maybe something that you see at an amusement park, right? Like right before you go in, or like a ticket booth, a ticket line. So we probably have seen these before, and this is what the formal name for them are called, teller windows. And if I'm looking at teller windows, and I'm really using my imagination, I can tell that there's a horizontal line, or there's a row, kind of going back and forth between the teller windows. These are not columns, okay? So when you're doing this application problem, I want you to remember that teller windows are rows, okay? Let's read it one more time. Then you're going to press pause and get your work done. Mrs. White is in line at the bank. There are 4 teller windows and 3 people are standing in line at each window. All right, press pause and get your work done. Press play when you're ready. Alrighty, so we should have something on our papers that look like this. Remember, math drawings do not need to be anything special. I have stick figures on my computer. You can have dots, it does not matter. So I have little black lines to kind of look like the windows. And I did that just to remind me that I need to be thinking about my rows as I'm drawing the people. So I know there are 4 teller windows. So I drew 1, 2, 3, 4. And then my next piece of information is there are 3 people standing in line at each window. Well, I know people don't stand in line next to each other. People stand in line behind one another. So I'm going to draw little stick figures behind each other. So we've got one in front, one in the middle, one behind, and I'm going to do that for each window. All right, so now that I've drawn my array, I can write the total number of people that I see. So we can do this a few ways. You can count by ones, which I don't think you need to do because we are past that as almost 3rd graders. We could count by 3s, or we could count by 4s. It is up to you. but in the end, you should have gotten 12 as your answer. All right, everyone take a deep breath. If this is tricky, that is okay. We will practice this until you get it. This is totally brand new, and you're learning it on the computer. So you need to give yourself some credit. This is hard work. If you do already know what you're doing, then that is awesome. I want you to challenge yourself. See if you can come up with a multiplication problem that matches the picture that you just drew. All right, for our problem set today, you are going to see a very disorganized group of things. Your job is to follow the directions on each of the questions. So here we are circling groups of 4. So remember, that means in each group there need to be 4. In this case, 4 triangles. Then draw the triangles into 2 equal rows. So they already did the hard work for you. Look at, they drew 2 rows right here. So your job is to imagine that you're taking all these triangles and you're moving them to the right space on your rows. Okay? So you need to think to yourself, do I need to fit all these triangles, all 8 of these triangles up at the top? Or do I need to draw it like this, 1 at the bottom? Think to yourself, what do I need to do in order to make 2 equal rows? All right, same thing down here, except we are using smiley faces. We're going to do them in equal rows and in equal columns. And over here with hearts. Number 4 says count the objects in the arrays from left to right by rows and by columns. As you count, circle the rows. Remember, rows are left to right, and columns are up and down. So I am circling my rows, and I am circling my columns. Redraw the circles and stars in problem 4 as columns of 2. All right, this is a little bit of a trick question, so I'm interested to see how you guys do with this. Same one with this over here. All right, take your time. Please let me know if you have any questions. If you are completing this on Seesaw, you can record yourself asking me a question. Or if it's too difficult for you to draw out anything, I know some of you are having trouble kind of using the trackpad on your Chromebooks to make some neat drawings. If you would rather just record what you would do or what you would draw and tell me, you can do that too. Whatever is going to be easiest for you. All right, good luck, and I can't wait to see your work.